then Amazon then and today are entirely different companies. But the NASDAQ head considers it a disgrace to pursue a rejection of globalization policy. Adena Friedman also offers another solution to the social inequality problem. Welcome to the Coin Post. We often talk about the upcoming crisis, the market collapse, everything getting worse, and that only a few will survive this financial collapse. But is that what we all want? Isn't it better not to think about the crisis, but about what we can do to prevent tragic consequences or at least make up for them? Today, I'm offering you a review of the interview with NASDAQ President Adena Friedman. She doesn't promise any Armageddon, but she shares her professional vision of the stock market, of Apple, Amazon, and other tech companies. She also offers her recipe for how capitalism can still save itself, prevent a prolonged crisis, and even solve social inequality between the rich and the poor. So, Coin Post is all positive today, and I wish that for you too. Join our community and subscribe to the channel, please. Let's dive in. Let's start with the IPO market, which many companies have decided to cancel due to the crisis. However, then everybody intensified their activities, seeing how much money there is on the market. And the NASDAQ head clearly knows how things are going there. She points out that the rapid recovery of the public housing market and the momentum it gained in May had really surprised her. Growth has been driven by medical and high-tech companies, which humanity is now hoping for, expecting innovations to stop the pandemic. However, she believes that this process will continue in the future, and as there is a large amount of money on the market, and new companies are able and want to attract capital for their own development, like investment funds, many of them have already recovered from the shock and are now ready to join some promising projects. But right now, I mean in September and October, you shouldn't expect high IPO activity, because there's very little time left before the US presidential election, and this period is a time of uncertainty. Usually, at times like this, nobody wants to enter the IPO. So this is what we got for starters. Then we'll have more fascinating stuff and end with the global economy review and the future of capitalism. But first, let's assess how much the US stock market is overheated. So far, several companies are helping out the stock market, and it's become apparent following the March crash. Everybody knows them. It's Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, and Apple. The capitalization of the latter hit $2 trillion. Other companies are also developing. Some hit it off like Tesla, but the market relies on these 5 giants. Now, let's say they collapse. While you imagine the scale of the tragedy, I'm gonna back to our guest Adena Friedman. She thinks that we have big global market cycles, and each one has its leaders. They used to be railroad companies when they built the infrastructure to communicate between cities and countries, and then industry made a leap forward. Then they were replaced by oil and gas companies. We still use those products today, and we're not gonna give them up for a long time. And each time, these companies grew faster and became more expensive in their country globally. Today, it's the technology time, when usability is ensured by software. It's a new trend, and it will continue in the future, so it makes sense that the market leaders are worth more than the others. If we compare the year 2000 with the dot-com bubble, then Amazon then and today are entirely different companies. Some may say that Amazon stock and other market leaders are too overvalued. But if you take the ratio of stock prices to the real product or service they produce today, the bubble is clearly much smaller at the moment. These companies have a strong production base and demand for their products and stocks, so if the business remains stable and evolving despite the high stock price. If you go along with Adena Friedman and my mood today, give us your thumbs up, because you can't always make it scary and terrifying. You have to compare different points of view, and we're moving on. Even before the pandemic, Donald Trump started trade wars and urged to return production from China to the US. Since the coronavirus, these trends have intensified as the international communication shut down due to quarantine measures highlighted a significant problem in the current global economic system. But the NASDAQ head considers it a disgrace to pursue a rejection of globalization policy. She notes that in the short term, it makes sense in returning some of the production to the US or other countries provided that there is an economic rationale. But in the long run, this trend should not be massive. The global economy creates new jobs. It's brought other countries to an entirely new development level that they couldn't have achieved on their own. It's also a kind of unity for various countries to act more cohesively. And even each person gets a lot more freedom in terms of travel, education, work, or business. It's only become possible due to globalization, and denying it would be just foolish despite the coronavirus and the new political mood. I would add that the slogans of Trump and other politicians in other countries sound, on the one hand, tempting, getting production back, creating new jobs, doing everything by themselves, but those who believe in these claims forget the globalization did not happen on the whim, but because it was economically beneficial. Let's take Apple for instance. Imagine they bring back the iPhone plans from China, but Americans will clearly want a higher salary so that prices could rise even higher, and the Americans will have to pay again. It's also important to understand that deglobalization is not just about manufacturing, but about tourism, education, logistics, and the international labor market. If we screw everything up, the world could go backward in its development by 20 years or more. And that's the reason the economy suffered enormous damage because of the coronavirus, which, according to recent estimates, could amount to $35 trillion, because the quarantine left behind the processes that made a world global. Next, we have a big talk about capitalism, and if it survives and we avoid a crisis, our YouTube viewers will be the first to know. So subscribe to the channel and make sure you turn on the notifications. Adena Friedman is a capitalism supporter and believes that this is the right thing that governments are pumping markets with liquidity. She's confident that the US authorities must now stay the course and continue to take measures to avert a major economic crisis. Making matters worse, we're expecting a high level of social inequality. And it's impossible to solve this at the state level alone, but both corporate and private sector assistance. Our guest believes that the solution to the crisis lies in innovation. Indeed, the current situation has created particular conditions and should generate new ideas, services, products. Both countries and companies can and should assist these processes by providing resources and, above all, funding new projects. Adena Friedman also offers another solution to the social inequality problem, which involves giving shares of companies to employees as a salary. It used to be a widespread practice, and NASDAQ keeps doing it today. However, most companies gave it up after accounting rules changed, and it became unprofitable to pay taxes. If we get this practice back to make it widespread, people will have a stake in a business that they work for and will become richer as it develops. Plus, it's a great motivation to work efficiently. Such synergy could be called corporate capitalism, and existing investors could play an important part there. They have to remember, they don't just make money on stocks, they have to find the best opportunity to buy and sell. They are also co-owners of companies, which means they can influence their decisions. And if investors force large businesses to tackle social inequality, they will. So this is a simple and quite real recipe from Adena Friedman for changing the world's social inequality problem. Share in the comments if you believe that companies can re-establish the practice of paying with shares and if it can help to overcome social inequality. For example, what to do with people who don't work for big corporations. And please support the channel, subscribe and like the video. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching. It's the Coin Post channel. Subscribe and get enlightened.